Dear friends, welcome to Think BRICS. We are here today to discuss a significant shift in global dynamics, the recent rapprochement between India and China. For years, relations were strained, marked by border clashes and halt in direct flights. However, recent diplomatic breakthroughs suggest a new chapter. I'm glad to introduce our guests today. Jingjing, a journalist, YouTuber, and political commentator who's well known for giving her take on global affairs from a Chinese perspective. And Janvi Sonaiya, a senior journalist from the Indo-Asian News Service. Ladies, welcome to Think BRICS. I'm glad to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
As I told, it's a pleasure to have you both again on Think BRICS, and I invite our viewers to follow our promising discussion dedicated to India and China. Well, again, to our viewers, let me do a short but necessary introduction because the timing of our discussion couldn't be more crucial. Well, right now, India and China are dealing with a geopolitical landscape that's changing fast. Prime Minister Modi is heading to China for the next SEO summit that will take place in China in the end of this month, which will be his first visit back to China in 6 years. This summer saw a huge amount of high-level trilateral meetings, foreign ministers and prime ministers from China, India, and Russia, all getting together for some important talks. India is getting ready to take over the BRICS chairmanship in 2026, putting itself right at the heart of global South economic integration. And with Trump threatening new tariffs on India and his trade war with China showing no signs of slowing down, things are, things are looking pretty tense. With all the economic pressure from Washington and deepening of multipolar cooperation, both Asian giants seem to be rethinking their relationships. Well, let's start with the first question with your personal views on these events. Janvi, do you see these activities in a positive way? How would you describe where India China relations stand today?
When we see this situation of Beijing and New Delhi having this common problem with Washington, it might look that China and India are coming closer, and it is a marriage of convenience. But as an Indian, when I see it, it reminds me of 1950s when India was one of the few was in fact the first non-communist country to recognize People's Republic of China, or those times when we had the slogans called Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, means Chinese and Indians are, brothers. And right now, when I see the situation between China and India, we saw the signs of the two countries coming closer, not just in the last few months, but from the last year itself. The two countries were making discussions to start their engagement after the Galwan crisis. And whatever the tariffs or the US, Donald Trump's decisions have just fastened up this whole process of the two countries coming closer and trying to engage better. We have already seen some signs in the sense that, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is now on direct flights between the two countries, media engagement between the two countries, and also the people to people connect which was missing between the two countries for years. I see that progressing now. And I think it's a step in the positive direction, considering that the two countries have, yes, had rough patches, but there were also trade and economic relations between the two countries over the years. And even when the two countries were having border conflict, the trade between the two countries was always on. So yeah, I think this is a positive step, and I see more of it in the coming months.
Thank you. Jingjing, on September the 3rd, Beijing will host a Victory Day parade marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War. China and other Asian countries, as well as the Soviet Union, made huge sacrifices in that war, something which is not widely recognized in the West. Do you think this commemoration could inspire China and India to move past the current mistrust and find common ground?
Hmm. Thank you so much for the question. I think you mentioned something really important because um, first, China, Soviet Union, Russia, and India, we were all allies in fighting against the fascists during the World Anti-Fascist War, the World War II. And India, Soviet Union both sent their soldiers to fight directly with Chinese people to fight against the Japanese aggression. And we were all winners of the World War II. So I think now is the high time to remind the world how we defeated fascists in the World War II, how devastating that war was to the whole world, and how we built a post-World War II world order, how the United Nations was founded. Why it's high time? Because we see fascism is rising in different corners of the world. The capitalist world's crisis is continue to uh, like fueling other fascist forces in the world and trying to deny and twist it the World War II history. So it's important to remind everybody how we built that. So, and as you mentioned, yes, China already announced to the whole world on September the 3rd, there will be a commemoration event taking place in Beijing. A huge military parade will take place at Tiananmen Square in Beijing on that day to show how we safeguard peace and defeated fascists. And several international leaders will attend as well. And also before that V-Day commemoration, we also will have a very important Global South country meetings, the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, that will take place in Tianjin, a nearby city, nearby Beijing. And President Putin, President Modi will all come to China to meet and talk how we will safeguard the regional stability in Asia. It's very important to discuss that topic. I'm so glad, as our my peer Janvi said, like we have a long history of friendship. China and India, we have as two oldest civilizations in the world. We have a very long history of friendship and communications. We had some conflicts in the past few years, but I think both Chinese people and Indian people are very happy to see like we are peacefully resolving and discussing how to maintain peace and in the border and how to continue their friendly exchanges and economic communications is very important because we need to keep Asia united and remember like the US empire's big strategy is to divide and conquer. We saw decades long of wars, terrorism, instabilities in Eurasia. So it's really important that we should stay united, and it's beneficial. I think what brings China and India together and Russia together and everybody else in the global south together is our common interests.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Thank you. Janvi, India is part of big groups like BRICS and SCO, as we know, but also works closely with Western partners through the Quad. How does India see its role in balancing these ties and supporting a more balanced, multipolar world?
I think in geopolitics, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. And that's what India, or for that matter, any other country is doing to be in different groups. But at the end, you look at your own strategic autonomy. You look at your own interest first. I mean, what is the best for your country? And India, if you look at India's foreign policy after its independence, you see the non alignment. And today it has evolved, but still, India's strategic or autonomy is at the core of India's foreign policy. So, whether it is engaging with Western nations or it is engaging with Russia or China, we're looking at what is best for our own people. To give you an example of India being threatened with 50% tariffs on exports. And we see, Donald Trump's statements on how India should stop buying Russian oil. And instead of putting a full stop on our engagement with Russia, India has doubled down on its engagement with this country due to the long term partnership. But having said that, India is also working with US when it comes to space, when it comes to technological exchange, when it comes to exchange around manpower, or when it comes to automobiles. So it's not like being a part of the camp and just rubbing off everything else. It is about being a part of different camps and putting your voice forward and bringing out the best from whether it is BRICS or SEO or Quad. And India has been doing it for years, and I don't think India's approach to other countries change in this regard in the near future.
Jingjing, the next question is yours.
Mhm.
China is pushing for less reliance on the US dollar in global trade. How does China see its partnership with India and other BRICS countries in using local currencies, building new payment systems, and making BRICS Bank, NDB, more stronger?
Mm. I think, well, I think first of all, we need to remember and recognize China wasn't the only country to calling for the alternative global reserve. Actually, it's a request by basically all global South, all the developing countries in the global South, and many BRICS countries, developing countries, have been calling to use local currencies instead of using US dollars as a global reserve currencies. For example, Brazil has been one of the loudest voice to do that. When Brazilian President Lula paid a state visit to China in 2023, and he visited the new development bank, the BRICS Bank, and he said in his speech, he was calling for like the world needs another currency while we use US dollars. And it's a so we need to ask why all the development countries in the global south is calling for de-dollarization, and why are we looking for alternative currencies? Well, because all the developing countries are the victims of this US dollar as the global reserve currency, because it became a weapon. In the modern days, we fought hot wars in World War One, World War Two, but nowadays the wars is like including financial wars, cyber warfare, and the US dollar has become a weapon to, for example, the IMF and the World Bank, all their leaders are Western leaders, and when they offer loans to developing countries, they often come up with political and economic conditions. So, and then it just they set the real debt trap to global south countries, so to keep the global south countries at the bottom of global value chain. So the developing countries have long time have been the victims of this unfair global financial system. That's why the whole global south countries are coming together through multiple multilateral organizations such as BRICS to build a fairer financial institutions. For example, the New Development Bank, when they offer loans, they have no financial or political conditions. It's beneficial to developing countries. And just to remind everybody, before Trump took office, Trump openly said, I still have his quote here. Trump openly in his interview says, BRICS was put in there for a bad purpose. If they want to play games with a dollar, they gotta be hit with 100% tariffs. BRICS dies the minute Trump mentioned it. That's what Trump said, literally. So he's so scared of the BRICS. He sees BRICS as a threat to US dollar, and he wants to impose 100% tariffs on those countries. When US leaders show such a angry response, it means what we are doing is right, because it's threatening to the US oligarchs and the politicians' method of controlling the whole world. And he did impose all these tariffs on the his even his allies and friendly countries. For example, they imposed 50% tariffs on India, 50% tariffs on Brazil, and 50% on Vietnam. But all these countries have been longtime good friends of the US. What did they do to deserve such high tariffs? This is totally unfair, and it's destroying the common working class people in these development countries to make sure their rich people to get richer. So this is totally unfair, and that's exactly why global South countries are demanding an alternative. But of course, we need to see the reality. We don't see an imminent decline of U.S. dollar as the as the global currency. It's a gradual de-dollarization. Is a gradual process. Even the chairman of the New Development Bank, the Dilma Rousseff, also pointed out. We don't see but like the effort now is priorities like local currency operations is the absolute priority of building a more diverse, balanced international financial system. And the rise of the dollarization may not happen like the next day, but the rise of the initiative to expand the trading local currencies is undeniable. So this is the effort from developing countries to demand of a fairer global financial system.
Thank you. I agree totally that the dollarization path won't be fast and easy. It will take time and efforts, definitely. Well, Janvi, the next question for you. India has been under pressure from the United States for buying Russian oil. You mentioned that. Not only oil, not only oil, but weapons, even though other countries do the same. How is India handling this pressure while still protecting its own interests and old ties with Russia?
So before I speak on, how has India been handling this pressure, it is also worth noting that um, India and US has built bipartial relations over the years, and what Donald Trump is doing right now is also damaging the relations which are built with and through different presidents in both countries, and it has taken decades to rebuild these relations. Having said that, when it comes to India's strategy on dealing with it, as I mentioned earlier, the first is definitely to reform the old relation with countries like Russia, which India has been doing. We have seen the visit of India's foreign minister in Moscow recently. Number two is mending ties with different countries. To give you an example, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Maldives, and if you've seen the recent past, it was not relation between the two countries were not on a very good note. But we see the relationship changing for better. Similar cases with Canada. We have seen that in the past, due to the Khalistani movement, due to Justin Trudeau, things between the two countries were not as good as they should have been. But we saw the recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Canada during the G7 summit. And there have been talks between Mark Carney and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And we see that front also improving. The third thing that India is doing to handle this pressure is to create new avenues and create new partnerships. To give you an example, we saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi go to places like Trinidad and Tobago, or to places like Brazil, which has been a long-standing partner due to BRICS. But heads of the state of the two nations met and vouched on cooperations when it comes to the energy sector. And we also saw the latest visit to Namibia or Ghana, or for that matter. So we see new fronts opening, and when it comes to China, we saw a lot around how the two countries are improving their exchange. But one of the very nuanced example I can give of how India is also actively trying to improve its relation with China is to give an example of Dalai Lama and the selection of the succession of Dalai Lama. Tibet is a very sensitive issue for China, and India had the option of intervening or giving its opinion or on who should be the next Dalai Lama, as we know that the recent Dalai Lama has taken, wouldn't say refugee, but he is in India. And India gave, or the New Delhi gave a statement that it will not interfere in this religious issue, and it will not give its comments on who on the succession of Dalai Lama. So this was also a step in mending ties with China, because again, the Dalai Lama and Tibet are a very sensitive issue for China. So these are different measures on reaffirming our relation with the old partners, creating new avenues, and mending ties with the countries where there was problem in the recent past. These are the things that I see, the steps that New Delhi is actively taking in handling the pressure. And when it comes to old ties also, when it comes to Russia also, look, due to the tariffs, when it comes to Indian exports, might get impacted in the near future, or in the coming few months. And that's why New Delhi has raised this point with Russia also, that we need to balance the trade deficit between India and Russia. And New Delhi has also raised this point with China, when the China's foreign minister recently visited New Delhi, that the trade deficit between China and India is imbalanced. It is in favor of China, and we need to correct it. So the trade issues with USA can be balanced if we increase our trade with partners like Russia and China. And I see positive steps in both these aspects. And the discussions are on. We'll see how much is materialized in the coming few months.
Yeah, you mentioned about the visit of Indian delegation to Moscow recently, led by foreign minister, and in Russian media they dedicated a lot of time to this visit, and they say that, of course, they were talking about oil exports, and China and sorry, and India confirmed their stance that they will continue working with Russia despite threats arriving from the United States. Thank you, Jingjing. The U.S. has, as we talked, criticized India's ties with Russia and BRICS, even adding tariffs. From China's perspective, how does China see this US pressure? And could it push India to work more closely with China and other BRICS countries?
I think India, as an independent sovereign country, they have their rights to choose who to be friends with, who to like, which organization they want to join. They have their rights to do that. And what's the U.S. position to ask another independent sovereign country to like, don't do that? Why? So I think U.S. has absolutely no rights to ask India or any other independent countries to do anything in favor of the United States. And like in terms of our relationship, like China, like I mentioned earlier, China and India has long-term, like long history of friendship. And despite we had some conflicts in the past few years, the trade, the communications between the two countries never stopped. When you come to China, you will see a lot of Indian people are working and living in China. And I have some Indian colleagues even. So this communication trade never stopped despite we had some conflict. So we like neighboring countries, we existed with each other in the whole world for thousands of years. We have our own ways of dealing with conflict and disputes without bursting into bigger scale wars. So like, so if I think we prefer not to have foreign interventions like the United States, which is on the other side of the Pacific. They definitely have no right to talk about our regional issues. And it's also funny. I think that reminds me of what Henry Kissinger said. Well, to be U.S. friends might be dangerous, but to be U.S. enemy might be dangerous, but to be U.S. friends is lethal. And we are seeing exactly this playing out right now. Because once Trump took office, the first country he attacked is, say, Canada, Denmark, launched tariffs on India, Vietnam, Brazil, Europe. So he starts with all the allies and friends of the United States. Exactly, being the US friends is lethal. And I think it's becoming clearer for most people of the world. And also, I think it will not well also in let me say this, it's very funny because the US has been for a long time trying to separate China and Russia. US trying so hard to separate China and India, China and Vietnam, China and the Central Asian countries. But what Trump did achieved the exact opposite effect, because like at the end of this week we will have SCO meetings, the Central Asian countries coming together to discuss how we maintain regional stability, how we counter terrorism in this region. And we see Vietnam, who received 50% tariffs from the United States, joining BRICS just this year when the BRICS meeting took place in Brazil. They launched tariffs. They want to separate China and Vietnam joining BRICS as a partner country. So he's bringing all this country together because no one wants a bully, and now they want throw tariffs on India. India's like, okay, so we look for another reasonable partner who are my neighbors for a long time, who I have common interests and prosperity with. So whatever the U.S. empire is doing, I think is only accelerating the change of the geopolitics, is only accelerating the unity of global South countries.
Thank you. Like President Lula told, we are all sovereign nations. We don't need an emperor, right?
Yes, exactly.
Janvi, direct flights between India and China are starting again after a long break. Uh, what kind of benefits, economic or cultural, does India expect from this step?
First thing on which there have been official discussions and official agreements is on the export of urea, fertilizer from China to India. And for all these years, due to the disputes between the two country, the exports were at halt. But now the Chinese government has announced that they have designated around 7 million tons of urea, and from which a major part will be exported to India. As we know that India is still an agrarian country where more than 60% of Indians are working either in agriculture or into things around agriculture, and so urea is very important. And apart from that, uh, according to the formal discussions between the two heads of state, there will be more exchange between China and India when it comes to fertilizers, rare earths, magnets, and tunnel bearing machines. So these are direct economic benefits that we can see from the initial discussions between the two countries. And apart from that, when it comes to, say, cultural benefits for two countries, is definitely Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, which I cannot mention enough, because for Indians and especially Hindus, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is very important. And now the two governments have agreed that Indians will be allowed in that part. And that's why these are the positive changes. And apart from that, one of the things that the Indian government is doing, we see what the steps Indian government is doing on the external side when it comes to the other countries. But right now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also announced about reforms in our taxation. This is a little different from the Indian China's economic benefits, but this is how Indian government is also trying to handle the pressure better, and as a counter to the tariffs that are imposed on the nation, is the Indian government has announced reforms in the GST, that is goods and services tax. So if you buy anything, you have to pay GST, and it comes in 4 slabs. And the Indian government has announced that from this Diwali, just in a few months, 2 of those slabs will be removed, so that the consumers purchase more. There is more purchasing power, and it eventually has a positive impact in India's GDP. The impact was more than 0.5% on the India's GDP growth. So this is a lesser discussed a step that Indian government has done in the nation itself to counter the tariff. But I think that if implemented in a month or so, it will have a very positive impact on Indian consumers and also Indian manufacturers.
Actually, here we wanted to talk about direct flights, reestablishment, but it's okay. Jingjing, there is a long history of mistrust between India and China. Beyond just official talks, what is China doing to build a real and stronger long-term relationship with India?
I think, well, just last week, when China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited India and met with the his counterparts, China and India released a 10-point consensus. So everybody can look it up if they want to see the detail. So the 10-point consensus reached between India and China uh, focuses on maintaining peace and tranquility in border areas and enhancing bilateral relations. So they reached some key agreements, including setting up expert group to explore boundary delimitations, reopening 3 traditional border trading markets, and agreeing to hold the next talk, the 25th round of talks in China in 2026. So these are all the follow-ups, the previous agreements, leaders talk. So these are some of the positive consensus China and India agreed just this month. And I'm sure a lot of other agreements will follow as well. And will definitely bring a positive impact on economic, cultural communications between our two countries. We need to resume all of that because of the conflicts in the past few years. When there was not too many communications, that will cause misunderstandings and even hatred. We don't need that. We need more communication to understand, make people to people exchanges to understand each other better. And I can tell you, I remember just several years ago, when there was still a lot of communication between China and India, Indian movies were super popular in China. I'm sure like all the Chinese audience love the Indian movies, and many big Indian movies were in Chinese cinemas. And everybody saying, "Well, you know what? We need to learn from Indian movies. They tell so good stories." And several Indian stars take tours in China, and they were chased by a lot of people. And that happened before we had a border conflicts. I'm sure that will uh, be resumed because there's already a love towards Indian music and the movie. And I have some Indian friends who travel to Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And when they go there, and I was like, how do you feel about the trip? And all of them said, oh, the experience was incredible, especially because I'm Indian. I was like, why? Because apparently a lot of Xinjiang local people grew up watching Bollywood movies and they love all the music. So many of the Indian singers, movie stars are like way more well known in Xinjiang than the other provinces. So when my colleagues, my friends visited Xinjiang, and when local people ask them where are you from, they say, oh, I'm from India. They're like, oh, you're from India? And the local musicians start to play the Indian music with their instruments because a lot of Xinjiang people are like just natural musicians who can play like 10 instruments. They just play Indian music with their instruments. So they, as Indian, have a like, spectacular time in Xinjiang because everybody knows their culture. So that's what I say. Well, there's a lot of cultural communications between our two countries, and we need to resume that. I'm sure once the we can maintain border peace, and this time the the leaders talk among the leaders talk, both sides from China and India have been talking very positively about maintaining tranquility and peace in the region. So I see very, very positive signs from both sides showing so far. And I see after meeting Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, like Modi also posted on his Twitter account, he's very looking forward to continue the talk when he visited Tianjin, attending the SCO. So far the signs are very positive. I'm sure we all, as the people of the country, we're looking forward to see the positive outcomes, because that will benefit the people, both China and India, and most importantly, that will benefit the whole BRICS countries and global South countries. We need to resolve our internal conflicts for the bigger pictures, and that will be good for the Asia and the global South.
Thank you. Uh, you told about movie, and I remembered myself when I was small. Indian movies in Soviet Union were very popular, very popular. And the one that I remember is called, maybe Janvi knows that. The actor, the famous Indian actor is Raj Kapoor. He's
Raj
well,
Kapoor, yes.
he's
Avara
old and
who?
he's very well known in Russia. And that very famous movie that's called Gita and Zita, about two girls, twins, separated in different families.
Yes, Sita or
Well,
Gita, yes. You know,
people to
what she
people
said really,
relation is very important.
when it comes to people relations, we're very happy because TikTok is back in India. Like, we'll soon have TikTok. It was banned for years. And
Is it already back?
I mean, announced. They have announced that it will be back, and people are already rehearsing the kind of content that they will make on TikTok
Oh.
once they have this back. So that's really thing. And you know, one thing that's Indian Chinese, I think that food is a character of its own. If you ever have Indian Chinese food, it's nothing like what you get there, but we have our own version.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Well, Janvi, after
Yeah.
2020, Chinese investment in India dropped, but it started picking up again in 2023. How is India managing this? Trying to grow the economy, but also keeping national security in mind.
National security is definitely a very big matter of concern, irrespective when two countries are coming closer. Because if you pull up India's map from the top itself, from the Himalayas to going to the northeast, till like Arunachal Pradesh, we have seen ranges where there are border conflicts between India and China, and one cannot ignore that fact. In fact, when the two countries are coming closer, India's foreign minister S. Jaishankar has also raised points on a couple of things. One is on, China's extensive work in the Indian Ocean and its expansion in the Indian Ocean. Second was China is building world's largest dam in the area near Tibet, and if this happens, it will impact the water flow to India, and not just India, to the other neighboring countries also. That's definitely a matter of concern and national security when the two countries are coming closer. When it comes to what India is doing in this time of, where the two nations have a complicated past, India has recently worked on intermediate range ballistic missile Agni 5 in Indian state called Odisha, and India is working on this missile to counter its neighbors if a crisis situation arises in future. So when it comes to India's marine force, or when it comes to India's missile force, or when it comes to diplomatic negotiations between the two countries, India has been working on all these fronts. India is, I see, working with caution, in handling this situation. And here also, I would want to, bring the British in the conversation, because the border conflict between India and China is there because India acknowledges the McMahon line, which was drawn by the British, and China doesn't acknowledge it. And that's why there has been this border dispute among the two nations uh, in the post colonial era. So, that was just a fact that I think it's worth mentioning when we are talking about the border dispute. But yeah, these are some of the measures that India has been doing when it comes to national security in dealing with its long-standing neighbor, China. Mhm.
Thank you. Well, Jingjing, if we go to China again, back to China again, China supports working more closely with India and Russia through the RIC group, like we are today, Russia, India, and China. What are China's main goals with this? And how does it plan to make the group more united and effective?
Mm. I think first, like China doesn't listen to what the US or other countries say about like don't be friends with that country, don't be friend that way country. China doesn't listen to this order. We choose our friend who to work with based on our own choice. What's our common interest? And I think it's important to recognize if China, Russia, India were divided, the only countries that will benefit from this are the some Western countries who have been trying so hard to divide this region. So just like Janvi mentioned, how the British caused the conflict between China and India, that reminds me of a lecture by Professor Jeffrey Sachs given recently. He said all the problems in the world nowadays go back to the British. That's the same about India, China, India, Pakistan, Palestine, Israel. Like basically, most of the problem nowadays, there's a colonial reason, and that's the trap set up that by the colonial powers. And the British were the main colonial powers, the driving this wedges between all these countries. So if we divided as isolated, the only people benefit from that are the colonial powers. It's important to recognize colonialism never really ended. We say, well, colonizers left, but their rules never really left. Most of the global south countries are still suffering from this neo-colonialism. It means they have, like, I interviewed many African scholars. Many African scholars say we only got flag independence. That means we only have our like own flags, but actually our political orders, economic conditions are still following the Western rules. That's what kept global South countries down. That's what kept these countries at like the bottom of the global value chain. So I think it's important to recognize China, Russia, India, and other global south countries, be it Central Asian countries, Western countries, African countries, Latin American countries, Southeast Asian countries, we all need to work together. And it's not countering any other countries. It's what's good for us. It's also important to bring back the non-alignment movement spirit. Also, is to recognize the World War II, the spirit of how we defeated fascism, and what's in the best interest of us. And also, I think I want to quote the official from Malaysia. Actually, he said because U.S. also threatened Malaysia to not work with China, but one senior official from Malaysia said to the U.S. just because just because you have an enemy doesn't mean they are our enemy. So we Asian countries have our ways to dealing our internal disputes, but doesn't mean we just because they are your enemy, like we China should be our enemy, and that should be the spirit of how we work with each other as well. So I think be it China, Russia, India, global South countries, we should work together to require, demand a fair global order, global financial system that have been putting us down for such a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you. As soon as we are almost finished here and we have lack of time, just briefly, as looking ahead, what's your long-term vision for China-India relations? And what are the biggest challenges that still need to be worked through to get there? Janvi.
When it comes to India China relations, I hope that, due to Washington and due to Donald Trump, they have been a catalyst in bringing China India closer. But I hope for more ties when it comes to not just economic but all people to people ties, because when it comes to Buddhism or food or culture, there has been a history and a cultural exchange between the two countries over the years. Having said that, when it comes to challenges, I cannot not bring major challenges here. To give you an example, is China's foreign minister when he visited New Delhi. India was his first stop, and the next was Pakistan. And rightly so, every country, be it Pakistan or China, looks for their own best interest, national interest, and they should. But there were, in Pahalgam, and when it comes to Operation Sindoor, there were recent conflicts between India and Pakistan, and during that conflict, we have seen Pakistan use missiles. We have seen them use things that they imported from China, and that is a matter of concern. And not just Pakistan, even when we look at our other neighbor Bangladesh, in the recent times, the situation between India and Bangladesh are not as good as they were in the past. And under Mohammed Yusuf, we have seen that Bangladesh has also been one of the major importers of Chinese military equipment. And these are the things that India needs to be cautious about. India needs to carefully consider these aspects when building the relationship with China. And we just hope the relation between the two countries to improve. But these are not the points that can go unnoticed. And uh, that's why I thought, to mention it here. Yeah.
Thank you. Jingjing, what's your take on long-term relationship between your countries, and what obstacles and challenges that need to be worked on?
Mm. Mm. I think, well, because I noticed especially Western media, but many media have been fear mongering about China for a really long time and stirring up conspiracy or totally misconceptions about China for a really long time. So many people in the whole world, even though have never been to China before, already scared of China. But I want to the, tell the people like China has been very clear and has announced to the whole world during several of our national most important political meetings that China is at any stage of development, no matter what stage of development China reaches, China will never seek hegemony or expansionism. It will never impose the like what China experienced colonialism and sufferings from the colonizers, and China experienced that, understand that, and China never want to impose the similar experience onto other countries. And China also made a promises to safeguard the global civilizations, the diversity of global civilizations, to safeguard the world peace, and to make sure every country, no matter big or small, have the same say at the world stage. They should be respected. And they are all the promises delivered by our president at multiple domestic meetings and international meetings. And China is dedicated to narrow the gap between global south and the global north. And China will always fight and speak up for the rights of global south countries. This is a promise made by Chinese leaders. And if you have been following China's history or like news, you will know when Chinese leaders make promises, they will deliver that. When they make promises to their domestic people, either to eliminate poverty, either to build bridges or railways, they deliver that promise. They sincerely deliver that promises. So this is the promise from Chinese leaders to the whole world to make sure all the countries have equal say on the world stage. The global South countries' rights and voices should be presented at the global stage. So I hope more people can understand and see each other not as a threat, but as a partner to work with. And you can see China's traits of there's a historical records you can see. I mean, when some media fear monger about China, saying how dangerous China is, but there were no wars in China's history in the past 40 years at least. But the Western media coming from this one country who launched hundreds of wars in the whole world in their short existence of 200 years. So I mean, there's a track records who is the real like fear mongering hegemony, who is not. So I hope people can see China like more balanced in a more balanced way. And I'm sure as long as the both sides work closely towards the same direction for to seek common interest and seek common prosperity, we will achieve the results of solidarity in Asia. So that's also my hope.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies. It was a pleasure to have you here today with us. Well, little note, if our viewers want to follow you online, where they can find you, Janvi.
They can find me on Instagram, THEJANVI. Yeah, that's where you find me.
Thank you. Jingjing.
People can find me on X, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Reddit, on TikTok. Just search my name, Li Jingjing, or Jingjing Li in some case. You will find my channel, my X account, and my short video accounts on Instagram and TikTok. Just I try my best to bring the voices, like from China to the people outside of China. I mean, people rather hear Chinese people's voices. So I try my best to like. If you are interested in seeing me talking about politics and news, welcome to subscribe my channel.
Thank you. I hope after this discussion, the number of your subscribers will grow. So thank you again. And that's all for today, dear viewers. Subscribe to Think BRICS. And thanks for watching.